Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, a podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. Today's guest is Andrew Scheim, a wellness practitioner, educator, and researcher working at the intersection of nervous system health, trauma recovery, and emerging wellness technologies. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right, Andrew, I would also like you to add a little bit introduction to that.
Uh, yeah, over the years, I've delved into many dimensions of holistic medicine, um, partly just out of my own necessity to heal. Um, but I just had many paths. I originally was more on a naturopathic path. Then I focused more in on energy and yoga, sort of yogic traditions, doing yoga type stuff. And then I started doing body work. And then I really started dialing in much more deeply into trauma and consciousness, sort of what you might call like Jungian shadow work. When I worked on clients, I always saw that the physical aspect, there was a huge, deep memory matrix behind people's structural problems. And I was always more actually drawn to the consciousness aspect. So in my work, it's kind of like I came in one way, leading more to the core essence of healing, which I do believe is a very deep meditative, sort of subconscious practice. But along the way, I did learn a lot of practical things, which was very important because there's environmental issues, there's toxicity issues, some pragmatic steps, hormone issues that I work with also. So it's not one thing or the other. My main influence is probably Chinese medicine and a teaching called Ho'oponopono. At the deepest philosophical and energetic level, those are my main, probably foundations, but naturopathy, homeopathy are also very much part of my studies and learning. The last thing I just want to mention is I did start looking at more advanced, what I call holistic technologies, which can be extremely helpful when one's dealing with chronic illness. So that's something I keep looking for what's out there and exploring options. And in my mind, sometimes these systems like Chinese medicine has stayed in the same lane for thousands of years. It would be nice if some of these traditions would modernize a bit, because there are newer technologies, and I think we should bring in the new with the old.
All right, thank you so much, Andrew. So let's get into the questions I have here for you. So for those hearing about it for the first time, what exactly is molecular hydrogen therapy and what is driving the growing interest in it?
Well, that is one of the tools that I call it a microcellular tool. I started looking around for therapies that would go very deep into the cell. So a lot of times when people are sick, they might take supplements, they might exercise, but the ability to go deep, deep, deep into the cells is problematic. There's very few therapies that actually deep dive into the cell, particularly when someone's really sick. So let's say you had a stroke and you're trying to get into that half-dead cell. Hydrogen is the most cell-permeable therapy there is. Everything in the universe is built from hydrogen. On the elemental chart, hydrogen is the smallest element. So it will go through steel. So its number one attribute is it's incredibly permeable. Its main action is it's anti-inflammatory, but actually deeper than that. Once hydrogen enters into a cell, it it can help the body figure out its own healing. It's almost like a primary intelligence. Again, everything in the universe is built from hydrogen. Hydrogen is the one from which all is created. So it has a sort of primordial intelligence that helps the body figure out its own healing. The key with hydrogen therapy is how much do you breathe, how much volume per minute, how much time per day, and this depends on how challenged somebody is.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. So, my next question for you is this: at a biological level, what is happening in the body when someone uses hydrogen therapy?
Well, it's the main therapeutic statement around hydrogen is it's anti-inflammatory. So if you have inflammation, it will help regulate inflammation. So, for instance, I had a little girl about 15 who was in the hospital every month with asthma. Asthma is an autoimmune inflammatory disease. I think it's important for people to understand what autoimmune is. So every time you hear the term autoimmune, it's associated with inflammation. So this is where the body supposedly is attacking itself. So what hydrogen does is it helps to try to balance out this phenomena called autoimmune. Now, it won't eliminate all inflammation, but it can knock it back. Inflammation or the fire element is good. It means the body's trying, like a fever, it's trying to fight something off. But if you get excessive inflammation, like the cytokine storm during COVID, is what killed people. So the hydrogen can knock back that cytokine storm so it doesn't become like a firestorm. It's almost like you have a big fire, a forest fire, and you're throwing rain on the forest fire. And if you do it preemptively, hydrogen, on a regular basis, it's dampening the burn, as you would say. So you don't get just tremendous inflammatory responses. Now, it's important to dig deeper. This is why I advocate my teachings, because I'm always asking people to look deeper. And if you're getting autoimmune inflammation, you have to ask yourself, why? What's going on? Now, once again, the hydrogen can help bring balance, but you want to dig deeper and look at the root of autoimmune inflammation. And that's pretty profound. So if you have, there's a lot of diseases that are called autoimmune: lupus, arthritis, asthma, nerve autoimmune, bone autoimmune, muscle autoimmune. So the question is, why is the body attacking itself? And this is a very important question, because we use these labels, we call it a name, we almost disempower ourselves when we just throw out labels and don't look at the dynamic. But once again, hydrogen will help to quell the reactive nature of autoimmune disease.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. So, people often hear about dose in medicine. What does dosage or concentration matter? Why does dosage or concentration matter so much in hydrogen therapy?
Well, first of all, the research is mostly out of Asia, most of the research, and it's being used in hospitals in Asia. So if you want to kind of look at the epicenter where most of the wisdom and usage of hydrogen therapy is taking place, it's in Asia. And if you look at what they're selling out of Asia, this is a pro and a con. They're selling machines that go to around 3 liters a minute as high-end machines. The only problem with their machines that they sell is that they break down very quickly. So if you're trying to do heavy-duty use, it's not a good machine to buy. But they did most of the research. So there's no, if you look around for research, there's nothing like 50 years of research on this. So you kind of have to follow the leading, let's say the leading culture, which is out of Japan and China. And in my clinical experience working with it, somewhere between 2 and 3 liters a minute is high dose. So if someone's really challenged, I recommend buying 2 of our machines, which will put out 2.4 liters a minute. Now, if you're the second aspect is how long do you breathe it? So let's say you're really, really challenged, and the typical thing is a power surge of about 3 hours at 2.4 liters a minute. Another way to do it is to breathe overnight. If you can't afford 2 machines, you buy 1 machine, which is 1.2 liters, and you breathe longer periods of time. There's a point where you will just slough off the excess. This is almost like you have 10 acres of super dry soil and you're throwing a soaker hose out there. How long do you run the soaker hose? How many hours? How much volume, et cetera, et cetera. It's a similar concept. But at some point, the body will reach a saturation point, and there's only so much hydrogen that could go in per breath. You can also drink the water, and you can also apply the hydrogen directly to the body. Again, this is one of several microcellular therapies that I recommend. We have 2 others that are very, very powerful that work at the cell level. So the goal is to get to the cell and help the cell heal. But as far as therapeutic dosage, that's the best assessment is somewhere between 2 to 3 liters per minute. And then the time just depends on how sick you are. But if you're really challenged, do a 3-hour power surge, take a break, and then do another 3 hours. I've had people breathing hydrogen who were literally dying. One gentleman was 85. He had a valve failure. They should have immediately done the surgery, but they had him scheduled 6 weeks out, and his wife said he was gasping for air. And they had 1 hydrogen machine. We got him on 2 hydrogen machines, and his breathing normalized. And he had the surgery 6 weeks later, and he's doing great. So it actually kept him alive until he got the surgery.
All right. Thank you so much. So, moving on, Andrew, when someone sees terms like clinic grade versus consumer device, what should they actually understand behind that distinction?
Well, that's pretty simple. It's just the durability of the machine. I have one machine that's 10 years old. We can send you a simple article explaining the difference between what's called proton exchange membrane machines and electrolysis machines. So I don't want to bore you with too much technical detail. We can send anybody a link. But the electrolysis machines, if they're properly cleaned and maintained, will go for many, many years. And the proton exchange membrane machines they have about a 5,000 hour total lifespan. They'll actually start to die out. 2 or 3,000, they'll diminish and totally die at 5,000. So once again, if we at the end, I'm going to mention that we offer a free wellness consult. We can send you all kinds of links with all this information. But if you just simply Google proton exchange membrane hydrogen machines, how long do they last? You'll find out. And one last thing, by the way, they kind of recommend on these proton exchange machines, breathe a couple hours a day. So they're not saying breathe 18 hours a day. So we just want to have a machine. If you want to use it an hour or two, that's great. If you want to use it for all day long or all night long, you don't have to worry about it breaking down.
All right. So, certain systems are designed for continuous or 24/7 use. Why would sustained exposure matter in some therapeutic protocols?
Can you say that one more time?
Certain systems are designed for continuous or 24/7 use. Why would sustained exposure matter in some therapeutic protocols?
Well, I think so. Yeah, my 24/7. I have a few statements I make. One is, what's the difference between a swamp and a mountain stream? The other is, microbes work 24/7. You need a 24/7 approach. So anybody who's suffering with chronic illness understands that 24/7. Let's say you have Lyme's disease or Candida, it just never goes away. It's working all the time. So the idea of the swamp and the mountain stream, I always say, well, what's the difference between a swamp and a mountain stream? They're both water. It's pretty simple. If you can get yourself to be more like a mountain stream, then you'll be healthy. But most people are like very dense swamps, and then the pathogens grow in that condition. So part of the goal, the problem is once you become that stagnant and the pathogens start to fester, you kind of gets pretty complicated because it involves all the different systems of medicine. Naturopathy says that all disease begins with a toxic colon. So pragmatically speaking, it's very important to understand that the colon is like the primordial nest for microbes, and that's where things start. Now, we talked about autoimmune disease before. So what happens is if these microbes take a seat in the body, they come in, they kind of start to fester. They're going to dump a lot of toxins into your blood. Some people call this leaky gut. And then the secondary immune system has to start overworking. If the colon is in very good condition, if the gut immunity, if you Google gut immunity, what percentage, it says 70% of your immune system is your gut immunity. It's the first line of defense. Now, here's the big problem. How do you functionally heal a toxic gut terrain or the swamp terrain? This is where people try over and over and over and fail over and over. We have very comprehensive videos laying out a very comprehensive program to work at the gut immunity. So this is not easy because it involves different tools. First of all, you have to understand what you're up against. The gut, once the transit time, in other words, you eat something and it should go out of you quickly, but if it doesn't, if it sits there and starts to fester, putrefy, that's the beginning of the problem. There's something called putrefied matter and post-putrefied matter. However, this is all discussed in naturopathic medicine. The problem is what protocols can change that gut to a vital gut immunity. If you have good gut health, number one, you won't get sick very much. Number two, you're eating and pooping. You're eating and pooping. Some people think once a day bowel movement is normal. It isn't. So there are different ways to assess the gut terrain, but understand that once that goes south, you get all these secondary issues. So you need the tools that we advocate, we have in our videos. One tool, for instance, is called medical ozone therapy. Now, this is more, once something gets, let's say you have chronic candida, ozone will start to kill off the candida aggressively. But you need way more than that because that's only an hour of therapy. This is where the 24/7 comes in. I always say if you do ozone and hit it with a big bomb of ozone, which is very effective, what happens the rest of the 23 hours a day? Because these pathogens just don't get knocked out all at once. So we have all these other therapies and protocols and supplements that can support the ozone therapy, such as high-end probiotics, so particularly soil bacteria strains. That's one piece. And again, we can send you a link to our videos and you can see all the different pieces of the program. It's not easy. Once the pathogens get in, they're hard to kick out. So you really need to be very tactically smart. By the way, the secondary nest, and people suffer with this, is the sinus cavity. People get chronic sinus infections and they never go away. So that's another strategic battle you need to learn to fight.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much. So where does hydrogen therapy fit within the bigger picture of cellular energy production and recovery processes in the body?
Um, well, first of all, in terms of the previous question, hydrogen is not very good at killing pathogens. So if you're using medical ozone, just as an example, it helps actually balance out the side effects. Ozone is very fiery. It's a pro-oxidative stress therapy, and you get oxidative stress from it. So hydrogen can help balance that therapy. As far as ATP goes, probably my favorite therapy for boosting ATP is pulsed electromagnetic, PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic therapy. This works at literally the millivolts of a cell. It works on the cell membrane. So let's say you're sick, your energy potential of that cell might be pretty low, like 20, 30 millivolts. PMF will boost the cell energy level back up to a healthier level. This is where, just gets challenging for anybody who's aging and is sick. The cells just literally are like dying batteries. So how do you boost? Also, our mission coil, which is it's like a lightning therapy, that works on the cell membrane and helps boost electrical potential. But PMF, if I was to try to boost cellular energy and actually act as a cell pump, I would pick PMF. Hydrogen is more calming, again, anti-inflammatory. It has a subtle way of improving cellular function, but it's not an energy pump per se.
All right. Thank you so much, Andrew. So here's my last question for you. What are some of the biggest misconceptions or misunderstandings people have about hydrogen therapy?
I don't know if they know enough to have any misconceptions. But do you know any? I mean, it's just not hardly known about in the United States. So that's an interesting question. What are the misconceptions? I guess the only misleading information that I've seen online, there's some teachers that say it's very dangerous to breathe high amounts of gas because you could have an explosion internally. So that is by far the biggest lie being told. It's used to scare people to buy this person's machine. He literally is telling people it's dangerous, you got to turn it down. Now that's dangerous recommendation because if you're sick, you need more gas. And I've never ever heard of anybody breathing hydrogen and having an internal explosion. It's just never happened. So this is a scare tactic. It's probably the biggest misconception that does circle in some of the hydrogen communities. Some people use that to sell their stuff. So again, look at what's coming out of China. They're selling very super high-end output machines, and nobody's ever saying, watch out, you're going to blow up. I mean, the only way to have, even with our machine, if you literally lit a cigarette while you're breathing the hydrogen, it'd be like someone breathing oxygen. The explosion would go back to the machine, and we have what's called flashback protection, and there'd be a little pop sound. But as far as you blowing up internally, it's just a fib. Now, oxygen, you can have an explosion. Hydrogen, you don't want to smoke a cigarette while you're breathing the gas. Let's put it that way. But that fear of internal explosion is just somebody trying to sell machines. That's the only real misconception, other than people don't know enough about how much gas. They don't know the therapeutic parameters. There's little understanding around that. A lot of the hydrogen actually that people are buying in the States is hydrogen water bottles. They're drinking the hydrogen water. So it's a rather new technology to be honest, and there's no hard, again, it hasn't been around 50 years. There needs to be more studies. Um, so we try to give you good links and resources to do your own research.
All right. So, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and perspective on hydrogen therapy and integrative wellness. So, for those who would like to connect with you and learn more about you, how can they do that?
Well, the links I think will be posted below, but if you Google the @ blue Z water, BLUE Z water, one word, you'll get to all our media. We have a YouTube channel with over 200 videos, and I have my personal website, andrewscheim.com, SCHEIM as a mark.com. And you can schedule, we offer a complimentary wellness strategy call. It's really important. Everybody's different. So when you call, we can sort out what's going on with you and make recommendations. And once again, everybody has different issues. And so we can send you links and start getting you on a foundational path. There's some simple things just everyone can do, one or two things that's better than doing nothing. And then we try to help you build, to the best of your ability, build your own home wellness clinic.
All right. So, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take